Long before the first whale entered the ocean, and long before the first shark reached its modern form, the seas became home to something far more dangerous. 252 million years ago, the worst extinction in Earth's history wiped out 96% of marine species. When the oceans finally recovered, they did not return to what they had been before. They became something entirely different. The Mesozoic seas were not simply dangerous in the way modern oceans are dangerous. They were filled with predators that have no true equivalent today. Some evolved from small coastal reptiles into 17-meter ocean hunters in what amounts to a geological instant. Others developed eyes the size of dinner plates, allowing them to hunt in darkness hundreds of meters below the surface. Some carried teeth designed not to kill prey, but to make escape impossible once the jaws closed. And for one extraordinary stretch of time, the oceans contained so many giant predator lineages at once that scientists still struggle to explain how they all shared the same waters. The largest ocean predators alive today would have struggled to dominate these seas, yet none of those creatures appeared overnight. They were the result of an evolutionary arms race that lasted nearly 186 million years. If this is your kind of thing, hit like and subscribe. It costs nothing and it keeps this channel going. And drop a comment below. Are you watching this winding down for the night, or watching this during your active day? Now, let's descend. For nearly 200 million years, the ocean existed beneath a sky that belonged to a different Earth. The familiar arrangement of continents had not yet emerged. Coastlines were temporary things, shifting slowly across spans of time, so vast that entire ecosystems rose and vanished, while the land itself was still moving. This was the Mesozoic era, extending from 252 million years ago until 66 million years ago, a period traditionally divided into three chapters: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. At the beginning of this era, most of Earth's land was joined together as Pangaea, a supercontinent of extraordinary scale. Its interior stretched so far from the sea that some regions experienced harsh seasonal extremes, while its margins bordered immense coastal environments. Over millions of years, deep fractures opened across the continent. Land masses drifted apart at the pace of growing fingernails, yet those slow movements transformed the planet. New seaways appeared. Ancient shorelines drowned beneath rising water. Ocean circulation patterns reorganized themselves again and again, carrying heat and nutrients into places that had previously been isolated. The seas of the Mesozoic were warmer than those of the modern world. Permanent polar ice was limited or absent for long intervals, allowing heat to spread more evenly across the globe. Sea levels stood hundreds of meters higher than today, flooding continental margins and creating immense shallow water habitats. Regions that are now mountains, deserts, and grasslands once lay beneath warm marine waters filled with drifting life. Vast stretches of the planet existed under conditions that modern oceans rarely approach. Among the most remarkable of these environments was the Western Interior Seaway. For millions of years, this inland sea divided North America into eastern and western land masses. Warm, relatively shallow, and rich in nutrients, it became one of the most biologically productive marine ecosystems in Earth's history. Countless species occupied its waters, from microscopic plankton near the surface to large predators moving through deeper channels. Energy flowed through the system with extraordinary efficiency, supporting food webs of immense complexity. Part of that productivity came from the atmosphere itself. Carbon dioxide concentrations were often between 2 and 8 times higher than modern levels. Combined with warm temperatures and extensive shallow seas, these conditions stimulated marine plant growth On a global scale, tiny photosynthetic organisms multiplied in staggering numbers. They formed the foundation of ecosystems that could sustain increasingly large populations of prey, and in turn, increasingly large predators. Yet the Mesozoic ocean was not simply an older version of the modern sea. Its foundations were laid by ecological succession following the greatest biological catastrophe Earth had ever experienced. When the Permian extinction swept through the oceans, nearly all established marine communities disappeared. Empty habitats remained behind, waiting to be occupied. Over the next 186 million years, evolution filled those vacancies with new experiments, new strategies, and entirely new forms of life. The ocean that emerged was not a restored world, it was a rebuilt one, shaped by different pressures and different opportunities. Across the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, that rebuilding process gradually produced an increasingly crowded and competitive sea, where each passing age added new layers of complexity to an already restless world. Long before marine reptiles carved through warm Mesozoic waters, another ocean existed beneath the same moon and stars. It was a sea that would not seem entirely alien to modern eyes. Fish moved through coastal shallows. Sharks occupied familiar predatory roles. Vast communities of shell bearing invertebrates covered the seafloor, filtering nutrients from the water and forming intricate ecosystems that had developed across tens of millions of years. Life was abundant, layered, and stable enough that many of its basic patterns would be recognizable today. The late Permian Ocean represented the culmination of a very old world. Reef systems flourished in many regions. Crinoids swayed in marine currents. Brachiopods, ammonoids, trilobite relatives, and countless other organisms occupied ecological roles, refined through deep time. The food webs were complex, supported by relationships that had endured for ages. Yet beneath that appearance of permanence, the foundations were becoming fragile. Around 252 million years ago, the stability ended. In what is now Siberia, enormous volcanic eruptions began pouring lava across the landscape on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. These eruptions continued for hundreds of thousands of years, creating the vast volcanic province known today as the Siberian Traps. Along with lava came immense quantities of carbon dioxide and methane. The atmosphere changed, temperatures climbed, oceans absorbed the consequences. As the planet warmed, seawater held less dissolved oxygen. Ocean circulation weakened in many regions, reducing the constant mixing that normally replenishes deeper waters. Oxygen levels fell further. Large portions of the seafloor entered a state known as anoxia, where little or no oxygen remained available for complex life. In some places, toxic compounds accumulated in stagnant waters. Entire ecosystems that had persisted for millions of years began to collapse. The extinction that followed remains the most severe biological crisis known in Earth's history. Approximately 96% of marine species disappeared. Countless evolutionary lineages ended completely. Organisms that had survived previous environmental upheavals vanished from the fossil record. Reef communities shattered. Predators disappeared alongside prey. The intricate architecture of the Permian Ocean was dismantled with startling thoroughness. What remained afterward was not an ocean teeming with survivors. For millions of years, much of the marine world existed in a diminished state. The earliest portion of the Triassic has often been described as a dead interval because complex ecosystems recovered only slowly. Fossil deposits from this time frequently reveal simplified communities, dominated by a relatively small number of hardy species. The seafloor in many regions remains sparse and biologically impoverished. Evolution had space available On a scale rarely seen before or since, that emptiness changed the course of life. Ecological niches that had once been occupied were suddenly vacant. Predatory roles stood open. Entire modes of existence awaited new occupants. Along coastlines and estuaries, reptiles that had evolved on land encountered opportunities unlike anything their ancestors had known. The barriers that had once limited expansion into marine environments were weakened by absence. The ocean had not merely survived catastrophe, it had become a vast evolutionary frontier, a place where new experiments could unfold with unusual freedom. From that quiet beginning, the foundations of a completely different marine world slowly emerged. Along the margins of the early Triassic world, where rivers met tidal flats and coastlines stretched across newly recovering ecosystems, a quiet transformation was beginning. It did not happen once, nor did it follow a single path. Again and again, different reptile lineages approached the water's edge and gradually crossed a boundary that had separated life on land from life at sea for millions of years. Among the earliest of these pioneers were the ichthyosaurs. Their appearance in the fossil record comes astonishingly soon after the end Permian catastrophe, roughly 250 million years ago. Some researchers have suggested that their origins may trace back to reptiles that survived close to the extinction itself, though their precise ancestry remains uncertain. What is clear is that they emerged during a time when marine ecosystems still contained enormous opportunities for expansion. The first ichthyosaurs bore little resemblance to the sleek hunters they would later become. Forms such as Mixosaurus possessed elongated bodies and proportions that reflected an animal still adapting to its new environment. They occupied an intermediate state, neither fully terrestrial nor fully marine in appearance. Their movement through water was effective, but not yet refined, carrying traces of a past spent on land. Evolution moved with remarkable speed. Within approximately 20 million years, the ichthyosaur body had been reshaped into something strikingly efficient. Limbs shortened and broadened into flippers, capable of precise control. The tail developed a powerful vertical fluke that generated thrust through the water. The skull lengthened and the eyes expanded dramatically, allowing greater sensitivity in dimly lit environments. Features that had once served life on land gradually disappeared as new adaptations accumulated. Elsewhere, another lineage was exploring a different route into the sea. Nothosaurs spent much of their time in shallow coastal waters, moving between land and marine habitats. Their bodies were long and flexible, with elongated necks and limbs increasingly suited for swimming. They hunted near shorelines, taking advantage of ecological spaces left largely unoccupied after the extinction. Over time, their descendants would continue along the marine pathway, eventually giving rise to the plesiosaurs, a lineage that would endure for well over 100 million years. The Triassic seas also welcomed plecodonts, reptiles that solved the challenges of marine life in an entirely different way. Rather than pursuing fast moving prey, they specialized in crushing hard shelled organisms. Their broad teeth functioned like biological anvils, capable of breaking through protective armor that would have defeated many other predators. Some developed heavy body armor of their own, creating unusual silhouettes unlike anything that swims in modern oceans. What makes this period so remarkable is that these groups were not closely related specialists converging from a shared starting point. They represented separate evolutionary experiments. Yet, despite their different origins, similar patterns emerged repeatedly. Bodies became more streamlined, limbs transformed into paddles or flippers, tails evolved into increasingly effective propulsion systems. Natural selection kept arriving at comparable solutions. This process is known as convergent evolution, one of the most powerful themes in the history of life. The sea imposed its own demands, and unrelated reptiles responded in remarkably similar ways. The ocean was not shaping a single lineage, it was shaping many at once, gradually turning former inhabitants of the land into creatures built almost entirely by water. Size arrived surprisingly early. Only a relatively short time after reptiles first established themselves in marine environments, some ichthyosaurs had already become giants. The oceans were still young in their recovery, still assembling new food webs and ecological relationships. Yet certain lineages were expanding in scale at a pace rarely seen in the history of vertebrate evolution. By the middle of the Triassic period, around 230 million years ago, ichthyosaurs were no longer experimental newcomers. They had become the dominant large predators of the sea. Among the most remarkable discoveries is Symbospondylus jungurum, formally described in 2021. This enormous animal lived approximately 247 million years ago and reached an estimated length of 17 meters. At the time it swam through Triassic waters, few animals in Earth's history had ever attained such dimensions. What makes its existence especially striking is how soon it appeared after the Great Extinction. Evolution required only a few million years to produce a predator of extraordinary scale from lineages that had only recently entered the marine realm. Its success reflects the unusual conditions of the early Triassic Ocean. Ecological space remained widely available, and many traditional competitors were gone. Energy flowed through newly forming food chains, allowing certain predators to grow rapidly and occupy positions that had once been impossible, rather than slowly climbing toward gigantism across vast stretches of time. Some ichthyosaurs seem to have accelerated toward it almost immediately. Another giant followed, Shonosaurus siconaiensis, known from fossils discovered in what is now British Columbia, reached an estimated length of 21 meters and lived around 210 million years ago. It exceeded the size of a modern sperm whale and ranks among the largest marine reptiles ever known. The animal's long body moved through open water with an efficiency that reflected millions of years of refinement, compressed into a surprisingly brief evolutionary interval. Yet length alone does not explain the success of these hunters. Their sensory adaptations reveal an equally important story. Certain ichthyosaurs developed eyes of astonishing size, unmatched by any other known vertebrate. Temnodontosaurus, a later representative of the group, possessed eyes reaching approximately 26 centimeters in diameter. Although it lived after the Triassic, it demonstrates the direction ichthyosaur evolution was taking. Such enormous eyes were not ornamental features. They were highly specialized instruments for gathering scarce light in the depths. Far below the sunlit surface, vision becomes increasingly difficult. Many prey animals appear only as faint silhouettes or brief flashes of bioluminescence. Large eyes allowed ichthyosaurs to detect these subtle signals and navigate environments where darkness dominated. Their hunting behavior may have resembled that of modern deep diving predators, descending through the water column in pursuit of elusive prey hidden far from daylight. Their commitment to ocean life extended beyond feeding. Fossils preserving embryos inside adult females demonstrate that ichthyosaurs gave live birth. Unlike reptiles that still depended on land for reproduction, they completed their entire life cycle at sea. Newborn young entered the water directly, beginning life in the same environment that sustained their parents. For much of the Triassic, few predators rivaled them in size or influence. The oceans contained danger, but the hierarchy remained relatively simple. The great ichthyosaurs occupied the highest levels of that world, gliding through vast waters that still held more opportunities than competitors. Not every successful predator pursued power through size, speed, or overwhelming force. As the Jurassic world began to take shape around 200 million years ago, another strategy emerged in the oceans, one built on precision, patience, and anatomy unlike anything seen before or since. These animals were the plesiosaurs, and their lineage would endure for roughly 135 million years, making them among the longest-lasting large marine predators in Earth's history. At first glance, plesiosaurs appear almost impossible. Their bodies combined features that seem as though they belong to different creatures entirely. Yet beneath that unusual appearance lay a design that proved remarkably effective. Over time, the group diverged into two very different forms, each representing a distinct solution to the challenges of life in the sea. One branch retained relatively small heads attached to extraordinarily elongated necks. Their bodies remained compact, and their teeth were generally suited for grasping smaller prey. These animals, often referred to as plesiosaurs in the narrower sense, occupied ecological roles centered on accuracy rather than brute strength. Fish and cephalopods formed much of their diet, and their anatomy allowed them to approach prey in ways that minimized detection. The other branch followed a different path. Their necks shortened, while their skulls expanded dramatically. Massive jaws, powerful musculature, and robust bodies transformed them into predators specialized for larger targets. These animals, known as plesiosaurs, would eventually become some of the most formidable hunters of the Jurassic oceans. Though both groups belonged to the same broader lineage, their hunting philosophies had diverged almost completely. Among the long-necked forms, few species illustrate the extremes of plesiosaur evolution better than Elasmosaurus. This animal possessed approximately 72 neck vertebrae, more than any other known animal. Its neck alone measured around 7 meters in length. For generations, this anatomy inspired images of a flexible serpent moving freely through the water. Modern biomechanical studies suggest something quite different. The neck was likely much stiffer than once imagined, functioning as a controlled and stable extension rather than a highly flexible whip. This structure may have allowed the head to approach prey, while the bulk of the body remained farther away. Small movements at the tip of a long neck created less disturbance in the surrounding water, increasing the chances of a successful strike. In a medium where pressure changes and vibrations travel efficiently, subtlety could be as valuable as speed. Locomotion added another layer of uniqueness. Plesiosaurs swam, using four large flippers that worked together in coordinated motions. Unlike fish, sharks, or modern marine mammals, they did not rely primarily on a tail for propulsion. Computer modeling and anatomical analysis suggest their movement resembled underwater flight, with each flipper generating lift and thrust through carefully controlled strokes. No living animal reproduces this system exactly. Their bodies also carried curious stones known as gastroliths. Some specimens preserve hundreds of these rounded rocks within the abdominal region. The total weight could reach several kilograms. Whether these stones aided digestion, helped regulate buoyancy, or served multiple purposes remains debated, but their repeated presence suggests they played an important role in plesiosaur biology. Fossils discovered in Antarctica reveal that plesiosaurs ranged far beyond temperate seas. They inhabited waters from equatorial regions to high latitudes, demonstrating a geographic reach that extended across nearly the entire planet. Their long history reflects a body plan that, however strange it appears today, was exceptionally successful in the ancient oceans. There comes a point in many evolutionary stories when specialization begins to narrow toward a single purpose. Features that once served multiple functions become increasingly focused. In the Jurassic oceans, one lineage followed that path with extraordinary intensity. The result was the plesiosaur, a predator whose anatomy seems assembled around the efficient capture and destruction of large prey. Unlike their long-necked relatives, plesiosaurs concentrated much of their mass at the front of the body. Their heads became enormous, their jaws deep and powerful, and their necks shortened into muscular supports capable of handling tremendous forces. The overall design reduced flexibility but increased strength. Every aspect of the animal suggested direct confrontation rather than delicate pursuit. Among the most impressive examples is Pliosaurus funki, sometimes nicknamed Predator X. Discovered in the Arctic deposits of Svalbard, Norway, this animal lived approximately 147 million years ago. Estimates place its length between 10 and 13 meters, though its most striking feature was its skull. Measuring nearly 2 meters long, the head alone exceeded the height of many adult humans. Within that skull sat rows of large conical teeth designed to seize struggling prey and maintain a grip through violent movement. The force generated by those jaws was extraordinary. Bite force estimates for the largest pliosaurs approach 33,000 newtons, placing them among the most powerful known bites in the animal kingdom. Such strength allowed them to target prey that would have been inaccessible to many other marine predators. Thick bones, large muscles, and heavy tissue offered little protection once those jaws closed. Yet power alone does not explain their success. Pliosaurs also possessed an unusually effective method of locomotion. Their four flippers worked together in a coordinated system unlike anything seen in modern oceans. Evidence suggests the front pair generated much of the forward pull, while the rear pair contributed additional thrust and stability. Rather than relying on a side-to-side tail motion, the entire body participated in propulsion. This arrangement provided both acceleration and control, valuable qualities for an ambush hunter pursuing large, mobile targets. Their sensory capabilities reveal an equally refined design. The nostrils were arranged in a manner that may have created a continuous flow of water across olfactory tissues. Water entering through forward openings could pass over scent-detecting structures before leaving through rear openings. Such a system may have allowed pliosaurs to determine the direction of chemical signals drifting through the sea, helping them locate prey over considerable distances. Fossil evidence indicates that prey included other marine reptiles. Bite marks matching pliosaur teeth have been identified on ichthyosaur remains, providing direct evidence of predator-on-predator interactions. Smaller plesiosaurs also appear to have been vulnerable. By the Jurassic period, marine ecosystems had become sufficiently complex that large reptiles were no longer competing only with fish and cephalopods. They were hunting one another. This shift altered the character of the ocean. Survival increasingly depended on defeating opponents equipped with comparable size, speed, and sensory abilities. Within that competitive environment, pliosaurs occupied one of the highest positions. Even Liopleurodon, often exaggerated in popular depictions, was a formidable predator at 6 to 7 meters in length. It belonged to a lineage that represented one of evolution's most focused expressions of predatory design, a lineage shaped by a sea where strength had become a decisive advantage. Perfection in evolution is never permanent, but there are moments when a lineage appears to come remarkably close to its environmental ideal. During the Jurassic period, stretching from approximately 201 million to 145 million years ago, the ichthyosaurs reached such a moment. The experimental forms of the Triassic had been refined through tens of millions of years of natural selection into animals of extraordinary efficiency, adapted not merely to survive in the sea, but to master it. Their bodies had become remarkably streamlined. Every contour seemed shaped by the movement of water itself. Among the best known examples is Ophthalmosaurus, an ichthyosaur whose proportions closely resemble those of modern, fast swimming marine animals. Its body narrowed smoothly toward a stiff tail fluke designed for sustained propulsion, reducing drag and maximizing efficiency. Although separated from dolphins by vastly different evolutionary histories, both arrived at surprisingly similar outlines, a testament to the physical demands imposed by life in open water. The name Ophthalmosaurus means eye lizard, and the title is well deserved. Its eyes were enormous, relative to body size, among the largest known for any marine vertebrate. Surrounding each eye was a ring of overlapping bony plates known as sclerotic rings. These structures acted as reinforcement, helping maintain the shape of the eye under increasing pressure at depth. Far below the surface, where sunlight fades into darkness, vision becomes difficult. Large eyes offered a significant advantage. Evidence preserved within the skeleton suggests that Ophthalmosaurus was capable of remarkable dives. Studies of bone structure indicate it may have descended to depths exceeding 600 meters and remained submerged for as long as 20 minutes. Such journeys carried it into environments rarely visited by most marine reptiles, where prey was scattered through dim layers of the ocean far removed from surface activity. Its appearance was equally sophisticated. Exceptionally preserved fossils have revealed traces of pigmentation, allowing scientists to reconstruct aspects of its coloration. Jurassic ichthyosaurs displayed countershading, with darker upper surfaces and lighter undersides. This pattern remains common among modern marine predators because it reduces visibility from multiple angles. Viewed from above, the darker back blends with deeper water. Viewed from below, the lighter underside merges with sunlight filtering through the surface. Even more surprising discoveries emerged from soft tissue preservation. In 2018, research published in Nature described fossil evidence from Stenopterygius that preserved not only skin, but also a layer of blubber. This finding transformed scientific understanding of ichthyosaur biology. Blubber serves as insulation, helping retain body heat in colder waters. Its presence suggests that ichthyosaurs possessed elevated metabolic capabilities and may have been partially or fully endothermic. Such physiological advantages would have expanded their ecological range considerably. Cold waters, deeper hunting grounds, and regions with fluctuating temperatures became more accessible. The ocean offered resources unavailable to animals restricted by external temperatures alone. Yet evolutionary success rarely guarantees permanence. As the Jurassic progressed, marine ecosystems grew increasingly crowded with competitors. New predators occupied expanding niches, while shifts in prey populations altered established relationships. Ichthyosaurs remained impressive hunters, but subtle pressures were accumulating within the changing oceans. Their lineage endured, though the effortless dominance of earlier ages had begun to soften around the edges, even as their adaptations reached their highest level of refinement. While giant reptiles battled for dominance in open water, another lineage was undertaking a transformation so complete that its descendants would scarcely resemble the riverbank hunters from which they originated. These were the marine crocodilians, animals that began as members of a group usually associated with marshes, estuaries, and freshwater channels, yet eventually became highly specialized predators of the sea. Their story unfolded primarily during the Jurassic, when several crocodilian lineages expanded into marine environments. Among the most successful were the metriorhynchids, a group that abandoned many of the characteristics traditionally associated with crocodilians. The heavy armor plating seen in modern crocodiles disappeared. Dense protective scales gave way to smoother skin that reduced drag. Limbs evolved into flipper-like structures, better suited for continuous swimming. Even the tail changed dramatically, developing a crescent-shaped fluke that provided propulsion through open water. The result was an animal that looked less like a crocodile and more like something shaped directly by the ocean. Metriorhynchids no longer depended on riverbanks or coastal ambush sites. They spent much of their lives far from shore, occupying ecological roles that required endurance, maneuverability, and efficient movement through marine currents. Within this group, different species pursued very different hunting strategies. One of the most striking was Dacosaurus maximus. Its skull was unusually deep and robust, giving it an appearance that often reminds researchers of large predatory dinosaurs rather than crocodilians. The teeth were broad, serrated, and built for cutting flesh. Instead of merely gripping prey, they were capable of slicing through tissue. This adaptation suggests a predator comfortable targeting large animals and removing substantial chunks of flesh with powerful bites. At the opposite end of the spectrum stood Geosaurus. Its skull was narrower, its jaws longer, and its teeth more slender. Rather than overpowering large prey, it appears to have specialized in pursuing smaller, faster animals. Fish likely formed an important component of its diet. The contrast between these two genera is striking. One emphasized force and tearing ability, the other emphasized speed and precision. This division echoes a pattern already emerging elsewhere in the Jurassic seas. Again and again, evolution seemed to arrive at similar solutions. Some predators specialized in pursuing small, agile prey, while others evolved toward the capture of larger animals. Different lineages repeatedly converged upon these broad ecological strategies despite their separate evolutionary origins. Marine crocodilians occupied an impressive geographic range. Fossils have been recovered from Europe, South America, and regions surrounding the ancient Tethys Sea, a vast tropical ocean that once stretched across much of what is now southern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Warm marine corridors connected distant habitats, allowing these reptiles to spread across enormous portions of the globe. Their success, however, was not permanent. By the close of the Jurassic, the balance of power in the oceans was shifting. Larger marine reptiles increasingly dominated many predatory niches, and competition intensified across marine ecosystems. The specialized crocodilians gradually disappeared from the fossil record, leaving no direct descendants to continue their marine experiment. Their absence today can make them easy to overlook, yet they reveal something important about the ancient seas. The Mesozoic ocean was not ruled by a single group of predators. It was a layered world crowded with competing designs, where danger emerged from countless evolutionary pathways moving through the same waters at once. Scattered through the rocks of ancient seabeds are countless spirals, some no larger than a coin, others broad enough to rival a vehicle tire. These fossils belong to ammonites, one of the most successful and abundant groups ever to inhabit the oceans. Although they rarely receive the attention given to giant marine reptiles, the story of the Mesozoic seas cannot be understood without them. They were not merely participants in those ecosystems. In many ways, they were the foundation upon which much of that world was built. Ammonites first appeared approximately 400 million years ago long before the rise of the great marine reptiles. They survived multiple extinction events, adapted to changing climates, and diversified into an astonishing range of forms. By the Mesozoic, they had become one of the defining inhabitants of marine environments across the globe. Their persistence speaks to a lineage capable of remarkable evolutionary flexibility. The diversity of ammonites was extraordinary. Thousands of species existed across the Mesozoic, occupying habitats from shallow coastal waters to deeper offshore environments. Some remained only a few centimeters across throughout their lives. Others grew to remarkable proportions. The largest known species, Parapuzosia sepenredensis, reached a shell diameter of approximately 2.5 meters. Its enormous spiral shell represents one of the most impressive examples of cephalopod growth ever discovered. That shell was far more than a protective covering. Internally, it consisted of a series of chambers separated by thin walls. As the animal grew, it sealed older chambers behind it while occupying only the newest outer section. By adjusting fluid and gas within these compartments, ammonites controlled buoyancy with remarkable precision. This biological ballast system allowed them to maintain position within the water column while expending relatively little energy. Despite their frequent appearance as prey in fossil evidence, ammonites were active hunters in their own right. Equipped with tentacles and a hard beak, they pursued smaller animals throughout the ocean. Their role resembled that of many modern cephalopods, occupying an intermediate position between tiny planktonic organisms and the larger predators that hunted them. They formed a crucial link in the transfer of energy through marine ecosystems. The fossil record preserves vivid evidence of the dangers they faced. Many ammonite shells bear puncture marks, fractures, and repaired injuries. Some scars correspond closely to the teeth of large marine reptiles. Others display crushing damage associated with marine turtles. Certain specimens contain precisely drilled holes left by predatory snails. These traces transform fossils into records of individual encounters, moments when predator and prey met in ancient seas. Over time, many ammonite species developed increasingly elaborate shell ornamentation. Ribs, spines, ridges, and unusual coiling patterns appeared repeatedly in different lineages. These structures may have made shells more difficult to crush, harder to grasp, or more resistant to attack. Like many inhabitants of the Mesozoic ocean, ammonites were participants in a long evolutionary contest between offense and defense. Their abundance made them indispensable. Vast populations provided food for fish, reptiles, turtles, and countless other predators. Entire marine food webs depended upon their continued success. When ammonites finally vanished at the end of the Cretaceous, an essential source of energy disappeared with them. The loss echoed upward through the ecosystem, removing one of the great biological engines that had sustained the oceans for millions of years. By the time the Cretaceous arrived, the ancient seas had accumulated a long history of experimentation. Lineages had appeared, diversified, competed, and vanished. Predators had become larger, senses had grown more refined, and marine ecosystems had developed layers of complexity unmatched by anything that existed at the beginning of the Mesozoic. Yet even after all that change, the oceans were still moving toward their most intense phase. The Cretaceous period lasted from approximately 145 million years ago until 66 million years ago. Across those millions of years, marine environments reached an extraordinary level of diversity and ecological complexity. The oceans contained more predator types, more specialized feeding strategies, and more overlapping food webs than any previous stage of the Mesozoic. Competition intensified across nearly every habitat, from shallow coastal waters to the open sea. One reason for this expansion was geography. Sea levels during the Cretaceous were among the highest known in Earth's history. In some intervals, oceans stood as much as 200 meters above modern levels. Water spread across continental interiors, creating enormous shallow marine environments rich in nutrients and sunlight. Habitats multiplied, new coastlines formed, vast regions that are now dry land existed beneath warm seas, teeming with life. Among the most remarkable of these marine systems was the Western Interior Seaway. At its greatest extent, it stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean and reached roughly 3,000 kilometers in width. North America was effectively divided into separate eastern and western landmasses by a broad corridor of water. Rather than remaining static, the seaway expanded and contracted repeatedly, responding to fluctuations in sea level and tectonic activity. These constant changes reshaped habitats and forced species to adapt to shifting conditions. The environment supported immense biological productivity. Warm temperatures accelerated ecological processes across large portions of the ocean. Nutrients circulated through shallow marine basins, fueling abundant plankton populations that formed the base of complex food webs. Fish diversified into new forms, cephalopods flourished, and predators benefited from a food supply capable of sustaining large populations. Ocean temperatures reached particularly elevated levels around 90 million years ago during an interval known as the Cretaceous thermal maximum. Tropical sea surface waters may have approached 35 degrees Celsius, creating conditions warmer than many modern marine environments. Heat spread across broad regions of the globe, allowing species to expand into areas that would otherwise have been less hospitable. Predators ranged farther, ecosystems became increasingly interconnected, and competition intensified across multiple latitudes. New hunters entered this world. Mosasaurs appeared and diversified rapidly. Polycotyledonid plesiosaurs introduced body plans unlike those of earlier long-necked relatives. Sharks grew larger and more varied, occupying ecological roles with increasing effectiveness. The marine predator community became broader and more crowded than at any previous point in the Mesozoic. Amid this expansion, one of the great dynasties of the ancient seas quietly disappeared. Ichthyosaurs, which had dominated marine ecosystems for roughly 150 million years, vanished from the fossil record around 90 million years ago. The reasons remain debated. Changes in prey availability, environmental shifts, and growing competition may all have contributed. Their disappearance created an opening within marine ecosystems, a vacancy at the highest levels of the food web. Into that space stepped a lineage unlike anything the oceans had produced before, one perfectly suited to the increasingly competitive world of the late Cretaceous. Some predators inherit an empire, others build one. The mosasaurs belonged firmly to the second category. They arrived surprisingly late in the history of the Mesozoic seas, entering a world already crowded with established hunters, yet within a relatively brief span of geological time, they transformed themselves into the dominant predators of the late Cretaceous. Their rise began approximately 98 million years ago. Compared to the ancient lineages that preceded them, mosasaurs were newcomers. They had neither the immense history of the ichthyosaurs nor the long evolutionary legacy of the plesiosaurs. Yet, over the course of only about 32 million years, they diversified into an extraordinary array of forms and occupied ecological roles across much of the global ocean. Their origins were surprisingly modest. The earliest ancestors of mosasaurs were ichthyosaurs, small semi-aquatic lizards that lived along coastal environments. These animals shared ancestry with modern monitor lizards, making mosasaurs more closely related to living Komodo dragons than to any dinosaur. From these relatively unremarkable beginnings emerged one of the most successful marine predator groups Earth has ever produced. Evolution acted with remarkable speed. Within a few million years, body plans began changing dramatically. Limbs adapted for swimming, tails lengthened, and became increasingly specialized for propulsion. The skeleton shifted toward a fully aquatic existence. By the time large mosasaurs appeared in the fossil record, they were no longer coastal reptiles, occasionally entering the sea. They had become permanent inhabitants of open marine environments. Among the largest was Mosasaurus hoffmanii, a species estimated to reach between 14 and 17 meters in length. Its elongated body combined flexibility with power, allowing it to move efficiently through water while retaining the ability to accelerate rapidly when pursuing prey. Unlike plesiosaurs, which relied on coordinated flipper strokes, mosasaurs generated most of their propulsion through the tail. Fossil evidence indicates the tail ended in a distinct fluke, producing movement patterns more similar to large sharks than to earlier marine reptiles. Their skulls reveal an equally sophisticated predatory design. Hidden within the roof of the mouth was a second set of teeth known as pterygoid teeth. These structures functioned like a conveyor system for prey. Once an animal was seized, escape became extraordinarily difficult. The jaws could grip, while the palate teeth helped pull food deeper into the throat. This adaptation proved especially useful when handling struggling prey underwater. Mosasaur diversity extended far beyond body size. Different species evolved teeth suited to very different diets. Some possessed slender, conical teeth, ideal for piercing fish. Others developed rounded, crushing teeth capable of breaking hard shells. Certain forms carried blade-like teeth, adapted for slicing through larger prey. Collectively, these variations allowed mosasaurs to exploit an enormous range of food sources. The fossil record preserves evidence of remarkable opportunism. Stomach contents and bite-marked remains indicate mosasaurs consumed sharks, large fish, ammonites, marine turtles, seabirds, and even other mosasaurs. Few predators displayed such dietary flexibility. They were not specialists tied to a narrow ecological niche. Instead, they were adaptable hunters capable of exploiting whatever opportunities their environment presented. In the increasingly competitive oceans of the late Cretaceous, that versatility became a decisive advantage. Mosasaurs were not simply another predator added to an already crowded ecosystem. They represented a new model of marine dominance, one refined by speed, adaptability, and an almost unmatched capacity to turn every available resource into survival. In the long history of marine predators, there are certain animals that seem less like members of an ecosystem and more like its final expression. They appear after millions of years of competition, carrying within their anatomy the accumulated results of countless evolutionary experiments. In the waters of the late Cretaceous western interior seaway, that role belonged to Tylosaurus proriger. This enormous mosasaur occupied one of the highest positions available in the marine food web. Estimates place its length at up to 14 meters, with some fragmentary remains hinting that exceptionally large individuals may have exceeded even that size. Moving through the warm waters that divided North America, it encountered an ecosystem crowded with predators, yet evidence consistently places Tylosaurus among the most dominant of them all. One feature immediately distinguishes it from many of its relatives. At the front of the skull sat a solid, elongated snout, unlike the tooth-bearing jaws behind it. This structure was rounded, heavily ossified, and appears to have lacked functional teeth. Rather than serving as a feeding tool, it may have functioned as a battering instrument. Many paleontologists suspect that Tylosaurus used this reinforced snout to strike prey before biting, delivering a forceful impact capable of stunning, disorienting, or injuring animals in open water. The feeding record preserved within fossils paints an extraordinary picture of its lifestyle. Stomach contents recovered from several specimens reveal a predator willing to consume almost anything it could overpower. Fish appear frequently. Sharks are represented as well. Smaller mosasaurs occasionally became prey. Diving birds known as hesperornithines have also been identified among preserved remains. Few predators demonstrate such a broad dietary range while simultaneously occupying the top tier of an ecosystem. Perhaps the most remarkable discovery comes from South Dakota, where a fossil specimen preserved evidence of a long-necked plesiosaur called Styxosaurus inside the stomach region of a Tylosaurus. The significance of this find extends beyond simple diet. It confirms that large mosasaurs actively hunted other major marine reptiles. These were not opportunistic scavengers, feeding only on weakened animals. They were capable of attacking and consuming some of the largest inhabitants of their environment. The geographic distribution of Tylosaurus further highlights its success. Fossils have been recovered from locations across North America and from New Zealand, indicating a lineage able to thrive across vast regions of the Cretaceous Ocean. Such a range suggests adaptability, ecological flexibility, and the ability to exploit a variety of marine conditions. Growth studies add another layer to the story. Analysis of bone tissues indicates that young individuals grew rapidly, reaching substantial sizes relatively early in life. In an ecosystem where juveniles were vulnerable to numerous predators, accelerated growth offered a clear advantage. Every increase in body size reduced the number of animals capable of posing a threat. By adulthood, however, those threats became increasingly scarce. Fully grown Tylosaurus occupied a position few creatures could challenge. It emerged at the end of a long evolutionary progression that stretched back through generations of marine reptiles, each shaped by relentless competition. In many respects, Tylosaurus represents the culmination of that process, a predator refined by millions of years of selection until it became one of the most formidable hunters ever to move through the sea. Long before marine reptiles entered the oceans, before the first ichthyosaur cut through Triassic waters or the first mosasaur appeared along a Cretaceous shoreline, sharks were already there. Their story reaches back approximately 450 million years, making them among the oldest surviving vertebrate lineages on Earth. Through mass extinctions, climatic upheavals, and the rise and fall of entire ecosystems, they remained a constant presence in the sea. During the Mesozoic, sharks occupied a different role from the gigantic reptiles that often dominate popular imagination. Most species were not colossal animals. Many measured only 2 to 4 meters in length and operated within ecological niches below the largest apex predators. Yet, their importance was profound. They hunted fish, scavenged carcasses, controlled prey populations, and linked different levels of the marine food web. In many ecosystems, they formed the connective tissue that held predator communities together. Among the exceptions was Cretoxorhina mantelli, one of the largest predatory sharks of the Cretaceous. Reaching lengths of approximately 6 to 7 meters, it possessed a streamlined body and powerful jaws armed with large, triangular teeth. Its appearance likely resembled that of modern lamniform sharks, though it inhabited a world very different from any modern ocean. The nickname Ginsu shark emerged from the slicing efficiency of its teeth, which were capable of cutting through flesh with remarkable effectiveness. Evidence preserved in fossils suggests that Cretoxorhina existed alongside the giant marine reptiles, not merely as a background predator, but as a direct participant in their world. Teeth associated with mosasaur remains, along with bite marks preserved on bones, indicate interactions between sharks and some of the largest hunters of the Cretaceous seas. Whether these encounters involved competition, scavenging, or occasional attacks remains difficult to determine, yet they reveal an ecosystem where even dominant predators were part of a broader network of interactions. One particularly famous fossil from Kansas captures this complexity. The remains preserve a Cretoxorhina associated with a partially consumed Tylosaurus. Debate continues regarding the exact circumstances. Some researchers interpret the evidence as scavenging, while others consider active predation a possibility. Regardless of the answer, the fossil demonstrates that sharks were capable of exploiting resources created by even the largest marine reptiles. Another important shark of the Cretaceous was Squalocorax. Its serrated teeth bear a striking resemblance to those of modern great white sharks. Fossils reveal an opportunistic feeding strategy. Bite marks attributed to Squalocorax have been discovered on dinosaur bones that drifted into marine environments, suggesting that it readily consumed terrestrial carcasses when the opportunity arose. Fish, marine animals, and floating remains all appear to have been part of its menu. What makes sharks especially significant is not merely their presence during the Mesozoic, but their survival beyond it. When the end Cretaceous extinction eliminated mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and numerous other marine lineages, sharks endured. Their persistence reflects a combination of traits that favored resilience. Flexible diets allowed them to exploit changing food sources. Rapid reproductive strategies helped populations recover. Their cartilaginous skeletons required fewer resources than massive bony structures. While many of the ocean's most spectacular predators vanished, sharks crossed the extinction boundary and continued into the modern world. They entered the Mesozoic long before its famous marine reptiles appeared, and when those reptiles disappeared, the sharks remained, carrying their ancient lineage forward into the seas we know today. Not every successful inhabitant of the Cretaceous ocean relied on speed, sharp teeth, or overwhelming aggression. Amid seas crowded with predators, another strategy endured. It was slower, quieter, and built around survival rather than pursuit. The giant marine turtles of the late Cretaceous represented one of the most remarkable examples of defensive adaptation in the history of ocean life. Their world was filled with hazards. Large mosasaurs patrolled the open water, sharks occupied numerous predatory roles, and competition shaped nearly every corner of the marine ecosystem. Yet turtles had already been refining their approach to survival for millions of years. Instead of becoming more specialized hunters, they invested in protection, endurance, and efficiency. The most impressive of these turtles was Archelon ascaros, living approximately 75 million years ago within the western interior seaway. It remains the largest turtle ever discovered. From head to tail, it measured roughly 4.5 meters in length, placing it among the largest non-predatory marine animals of its time. Its broad body drifted through waters already dominated by some of the most formidable predators Earth has ever produced. At first glance, one might imagine a shell similar to that of modern tortoises. The reality was far more unusual. The shell of Archelon was not a heavy dome of solid bone. Instead, it consisted of a framework of bony supports covered by thick, leathery tissue. This construction reduced weight while maintaining structural strength. In a marine environment where energy efficiency mattered, carrying less mass offered clear advantages. The design allowed the animal to travel through the water with greater ease than a fully armored shell would permit. Its feeding equipment reflected a very different lifestyle from the hunters surrounding it. Rather than rows of sharp teeth, Archelon possessed a powerful hooked beak. This structure was well suited for crushing and processing prey, such as ammonites, jellyfish, and other relatively slow-moving marine organisms. The turtle occupied a niche that depended less on active pursuit and more on exploiting abundant food resources scattered throughout the seaway. Yet size and protection did not grant immunity. Fossil evidence reveals that life remained dangerous even for giants. One specimen of Archelon was discovered missing a rear flipper, and the healed condition of the injury demonstrates that the animal survived the attack. The most likely culprit was a large mosasaur. The encounter serves as a reminder that defensive adaptations reduced risk but could not eliminate it entirely. A related turtle, Protostega, provides further evidence of these interactions. Several fossils preserve bite marks attributed to mosasaurs, confirming that giant turtles regularly encountered the dominant predators of their age. The shell itself could absorb substantial damage, yet the presence of these wounds illustrates how frequently survival depended on enduring rather than avoiding conflict. What makes these turtles especially significant is their long-term success. While the giant marine reptiles eventually vanished, turtles persisted. Their strategy emphasized flexibility rather than specialization. They occupied a broad range of ecological roles, consumed varied food sources, and relied on durable anatomical solutions that remained effective even as ecosystems changed. Modern leatherback sea turtles trace their ancestry back to this ancient lineage. Each migration across today's oceans carries faint echoes of a world where immense reptiles ruled the seas. The giants are gone, but the turtles remain, living representatives of an older and far more dangerous age. By the late Cretaceous, the ocean had become a place where evolutionary boundaries seemed unusually fluid. Reptiles had entered the water and transformed into giants. Ancient fish had adapted to shifting ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Even turtles had reshaped themselves for life in open seas. Amid this crowded world, another lineage took an unexpected path. Some of the earliest birds abandoned the skies and returned to the water. Among the most successful of these were the Hesperornithines, a group of specialized diving birds that lived between approximately 85 and 66 million years ago. They occupied the waters of the western interior seaway and several other marine environments across North America. Although unmistakably birds, they looked very different from the flying species familiar today. Their bodies reflected a life spent pursuing prey beneath the surface rather than traveling through the air. One of the best-known members of the group was Hesperornis regalis. Reaching roughly 1.8 meters in length, it was a substantial animal by avian standards. Its proportions revealed the story of its lifestyle. The wings had become tiny remnants, too reduced to support flight. At the same time, the legs shifted far toward the rear of the body, creating a powerful propulsion system for underwater swimming. On land, such an arrangement likely made movement awkward and cumbersome. In water, however, it transformed the bird into an efficient hunter. Modern loons and grebes offer a distant glimpse of this strategy, though neither approached the size of Hesperornis. With strong strokes of its hind limbs, the bird could accelerate beneath the surface in pursuit of fish. Schools of prey moved through warm inland seas, and Hesperornithians followed them with remarkable effectiveness. Their streamlined bodies reduced drag, while dense bones helped counter buoyancy, allowing longer and more controlled dives. Yet every hunt unfolded within one of the most dangerous marine ecosystems Earth has ever produced. Beneath the same waters swam enormous mosasaurs, capable of consuming prey of astonishing size. Fossil evidence provides direct proof of this relationship. Remains of Hesperornithians have been discovered within the stomach contents of Tylosaurus, demonstrating that these birds regularly appeared on the menu of the seaway's largest predators. Despite this danger, Hesperornithians flourished. Fossils have been recovered from regions stretching from present-day Kansas to the Canadian Arctic. Such a broad geographic range suggests they occupied an ecological niche with relatively little direct competition. They specialized in medium-sized aquatic prey, exploiting resources that larger reptiles often ignored. In doing so, they established themselves as a stable and widespread component of late Cretaceous marine communities. One of their most intriguing features was hidden inside the jaws. Unlike modern birds, Hesperornithines retained teeth. These were small, peg-like structures arranged within grooves along the jaw, rather than set in individual sockets. The presence of teeth places them close to a pivotal chapter in avian evolution, preserving characteristics that later vanished entirely from surviving bird lineages. Their story ended abruptly at the close of the Cretaceous. Alongside the mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ammonites, and countless other marine organisms, the Hesperornithines disappeared during the extinction event that reshaped life across the planet. What remains are fossils scattered across ancient seabeds, preserving the memory of birds that traded the sky for the sea and prospered there for millions of years. Not every successful predator of the late Cretaceous relied on speed, crushing force, or overwhelming size. In waters increasingly dominated by aggressive hunters, another strategy endured, quieter, slower, and remarkably specialized. The elasmosaurid plesiosaurs moved through the same seas as giant mosasaurs, yet survived by exploiting opportunities that their larger rivals often overlooked. Among them, Elasmosaurus platyurus remains one of the strangest animals ever produced by vertebrate evolution. First described in 1868, it reached approximately 14 meters in total length. What made the animal extraordinary was not its body size alone, but the distribution of that length. Roughly half belonged to its neck, creating proportions unlike anything alive today. With 72 cervical vertebrae, more than any other known animal, the neck formed a flexible but controlled extension that projected a relatively small head far ahead of the body. For many years, artists imagined these necks curling dramatically through the water, like the neck of a swan. Modern biomechanical studies paint a different picture. The neck could bend, but not with extreme freedom. Instead, it functioned as a precision instrument. While the large body remained farther away, the head could be positioned carefully among schools of fish or drifting cephalopods. Subtle movements reduced the amount of disturbance reaching potential prey. In an environment where a fraction of a second often determined success or failure, this approach offered distinct advantages. Their feeding habits appear to have been broader than once assumed. Tooth wear patterns preserved in fossils reveal scratches and abrasions consistent with contact against hard surfaces. Such evidence suggests that elasmosaurids regularly consumed shelled cephalopods, including ammonites, alongside fish and softer-bodied prey. Rather than specializing exclusively on one food source, they may have taken advantage of whatever suitable prey occupied their hunting grounds. Remarkably, those hunting grounds extended far beyond temperate seas. Fossils recovered from Snow Hill Island in Antarctica demonstrate that elasmosaurids inhabited polar environments during the late Cretaceous. Although the global climate remained warmer than today, these regions still experienced long periods of seasonal darkness. For months at a time, the sun remained below the horizon. Yet, elasmosaurids persisted there, navigating waters illuminated only by faint surface light and the occasional glow of marine life. Movement through the water reflected the same emphasis on control rather than speed. Computer modeling of their anatomy indicates that the four flippers operated in coordinated patterns resembling underwater flight. Unlike streamlined pursuit predators that depended on rapid acceleration, elasmosaurids appear to have favored maneuverability. They could turn efficiently, maintain stability, and position themselves precisely within complex marine environments. Every aspect of their design pointed toward accuracy rather than outright power. One enduring mystery concerns their earliest years. Juvenile elasmosaurid fossils remain exceptionally rare. This absence has prompted several possibilities. Young individuals may have occupied sheltered habitats separate from adults, reducing competition and predation. Alternatively, mortality among juveniles may have been extraordinarily high, leaving relatively few animals to reach maturity and enter the fossil record. Their continued success alongside mosasaurs reveals an important truth about the Cretaceous ocean. It was not governed by a single dominant predator or a single winning strategy. Instead, countless ecological roles existed simultaneously, each shaped by different pressures. Within that intricate system, the elasmosaurids carved out a place defined by patience, precision, and persistence. A peaceful ocean leaves behind one kind of fossil record, a battlefield leaves behind another. Scattered through marine sediments from the Jurassic and Cretaceous are bones marked by punctures, gouges, fractures, and scars, traces of encounters that unfolded tens of millions of years ago. These remains reveal a reality often overlooked when discussing prehistoric seas. The greatest danger did not always come from hunting prey. Increasingly, it came from confronting another predator. One of the clearest examples comes from a polycotyledonous plesiosaur discovered in Kansas. The flipper bones preserve a series of healed wounds whose spacing closely matches the teeth of a large mosasaur. The significance lies not merely in the attack itself, but in the healing. Bone tissue grew around the damage, proving the animal survived the encounter for a considerable period afterward. Somewhere in the waters of the western interior seaway, a powerful predator seized another large predator, failed to kill it, and left behind evidence of the struggle. Other fossils reveal attacks that may have been even more calculated. Certain specimens of Elasmosaurus bear bite marks concentrated near the vertebrae at the base of the neck. This placement appears unlikely to be random. The elongated neck was the animal's primary hunting tool, allowing it to position its head independently from its body. A strike aimed at that vulnerable region could disable the feature upon which its survival depended. Such evidence hints at predators capable of targeting weaknesses rather than simply attacking whatever body part happened to be within reach. The pattern extends further back in time. In Jurassic deposits across Europe, ichthyosaur bones have been discovered carrying damage consistent with the teeth of large plesiosaurs. These marks represent some of the earliest direct evidence that marine reptiles preyed upon other marine reptiles. By this stage, the ocean's dominant hunters were no longer focused exclusively on fish or cephalopods. Competitors themselves had become valuable sources of food. Even animals outside the great reptilian lineages participated in these dangerous interactions. Fossils of the giant shark Cretaceous have been recovered alongside partially consumed mosasaur remains. Whether the shark actively hunted weakened individuals or scavenged carcasses drifting through the sea remains uncertain. Either possibility reveals a food web in which no predator occupied a completely secure position. Death created opportunity, and opportunity was rarely ignored. Perhaps most striking is the evidence for cannibalism. Smaller mosasaur bones bearing tooth marks from larger members of the same group have been found in multiple deposits. Juveniles faced threats not only from competing species, but from their own relatives. In crowded ecosystems where resources fluctuated and encounters were frequent, even family resemblance offered no protection. These constant confrontations shaped evolution itself. Animals capable of detecting danger sooner survived more often. Those able to accelerate faster, maneuver more effectively, or withstand greater physical trauma gained important advantages. Over millions of years, natural selection amplified these traits across numerous lineages simultaneously. Improved vision, enhanced senses, reinforced skeletons, and increasingly efficient locomotion all emerged within this environment of relentless competition. The result was an ocean unlike any seen before or since. Survival did not depend solely on finding prey. It depended equally on avoiding becoming prey. Every hunter moved through a world populated by other hunters, each equipped with its own arsenal of adaptations. In such a sea, danger flowed in every direction, and even the rulers of the food chain lived under constant threat. Far below the reach of sunlight, size becomes less important than awareness. In the darkness of the Mesozoic ocean, predators often hunted where vision alone could no longer provide reliable information. Water absorbed light, scattered shadows, and concealed movement. Under such conditions, survival depended on the ability to gather clues from sources invisible to the eye. The great marine predators did not dominate merely because they were large or powerful. They dominated because they possessed sensory systems capable of revealing prey hidden within a vast and often lightless world. Among the most sophisticated of these hunters were the mosasaurs. Studies of their skull anatomy reveal a well-developed region associated with the Jacobson's organ, a chemosensory structure still used by modern monitor lizards and snakes. In living reptiles, this system collects chemical particles from the environment and helps construct a directional map of nearby activity. For a mosasaur moving through open water, such a capability may have functioned as a form of long-range tracking. Traces of blood, bodily secretions, or decomposition drifting through currents could provide valuable information about the location of prey, carrion, or competing predators. Unlike vision, chemical signals remain effective even when darkness becomes complete. A scent trail, carried by water, can persist over considerable distances, creating invisible pathways through the sea. For a large predator patrolling hundreds of square kilometers, the ability to interpret those pathways would have transformed the ocean from an empty expanse into a landscape rich with information. Other marine reptiles relied on different forms of perception. Detailed studies of plesiosaur inner ear anatomy suggest exceptional sensitivity to low-frequency vibrations. The semicircular canals responsible for detecting motion and balance appear well suited for interpreting subtle disturbances moving through the water. Large animals generate powerful pressure signatures as they swim. Even when hidden beyond sight, their movement creates vibrations capable of traveling considerable distances. A plesiosaur drifting through dim waters may have sensed approaching prey long before visual contact became possible. Ichthyosaurs developed another remarkable adaptation. Evidence indicates that they possessed highly refined lateral line systems, sensory organs positioned along the body that detected pressure changes in surrounding water. Modern fish use similar structures to track movement, navigate schools, and locate objects in darkness. For deep diving ichthyosaurs, such a system would have been invaluable. The faint bow wave generated by a moving animal could reveal its presence even in complete blackness. Vision nevertheless remained important, particularly in the deep ocean. Several ichthyosaur species possessed enormous eyes, unlike those of any other known vertebrate. These eyes were not simply oversized. They appear specifically adapted to gather extremely small amounts of available light. Many scientists believe they were particularly effective at detecting bioluminescence, the faint blue-green glow produced by countless deep-sea organisms. In environments where sunlight never penetrated, such flashes of living light may have served as navigation markers, prey indicators, and clues to the movement of entire ecosystems. Mosasaur hearing appears to have provided another layer of awareness. Their jaw structure suggests an adaptation for transmitting underwater sound vibrations, somewhat comparable to mechanisms seen in modern whales. Rather than relying solely on airborne hearing, they could interpret sounds traveling directly through water, allowing them to detect distant activity beyond visual range. Together, these abilities created predators that could search, track, and hunt across extraordinary conditions. Darkness offered little protection. Depth provided no guarantee of concealment. Whether through chemical traces, vibration, pressure changes, faint light, or distant sound, the Mesozoic ocean was filled with signals, and its greatest hunters evolved to read them all. Every successful predator carries within its body the story of countless generations that survived before it. Teeth, flippers, eyes, and hunting instincts could only persist if animals managed to reproduce in an environment where danger existed at every stage of life. In the Mesozoic ocean, reaching adulthood was never guaranteed. For many species, the greatest challenge was not finding food or avoiding rivals. It was producing offspring capable of surviving long enough to continue the lineage. The earliest clues emerged from the ichthyosaurs. Unlike reptiles tied to land, these fully marine hunters could no longer crawl ashore to lay eggs. Fossils discovered across Europe preserve a remarkable solution. Multiple specimens contain embryos inside adult females or newborn young positioned immediately outside the birth canal. These discoveries provide undeniable evidence that ichthyosaurs gave live birth. One specimen from Holzmaden in Germany is especially extraordinary. Preserved within fine-grained sediments, approximately 180 million years old, it captures a female in the act of giving birth, freezing a brief biological moment across an immense span of time. The details preserved in such fossils reveal another important adaptation. Several newborn ichthyosaurs appear positioned tail first during delivery. This mirrors the strategy used by modern whales and dolphins. By emerging tail first, the young remained connected to the mother until the final moments of birth, reducing the risk of drowning before reaching the surface to breathe. Evolution had independently arrived at a remarkably similar solution in two completely unrelated marine lineages separated by more than 100 million years. For decades, plesiosaur reproduction remained uncertain because direct fossil evidence was scarce. Then, in 2011, a remarkable specimen transformed scientific understanding. A polycotyledonid plesiosaur from Kansas was discovered containing a single large embryo. The unborn young occupied a substantial portion of the mother's body cavity, indicating a reproductive strategy very different from that of many modern reptiles. Rather than producing numerous small offspring, this animal invested heavily in one highly developed juvenile. Such a pattern resembles what biologists describe as a high investment strategy. Fewer offspring are produced, but each receives a larger share of available resources before birth. This discovery has encouraged speculation that at least some plesiosaurs may have provided a degree of parental care after birth. Direct proof remains elusive, yet the size and developmental state of the embryo suggest that survival depended on quality rather than quantity. Mosasaur reproduction offers another perspective on life in the ancient seas. Fossil discoveries described in 2014 revealed very young mosasaurs preserved in sediments deposited far from shore. Earlier assumptions had proposed that these reptiles returned to coastal environments to give birth. The evidence instead suggests that birth occurred in open water. From their first moments, juvenile mosasaurs entered an immense marine world without the shelter of protected nurseries. This circumstance carried significant consequences. Small individuals shared the ocean with predators many times their size, including adults of their own species. Growth therefore became a matter of urgency. The faster a juvenile could increase in size, the greater its chances of avoiding predation. Natural selection consistently favored efficient metabolism, rapid development, and earlier reproductive maturity. Across the Mesozoic seas, reproduction was never separate from survival. Every birth represented a gamble against overwhelming odds, yet those repeated gambles sustained some of the most extraordinary creatures that Earth has ever known. Far from the warm inland seas and sunlit continental shelves that often dominate our picture of the Mesozoic world, another ocean existed beneath a very different sky. For months at a time, the polar horizon saw no sunrise. Darkness settled across the water and remained there, uninterrupted through entire seasons. Yet, even in these distant regions, life did not retreat. Some of the largest marine reptiles on Earth established themselves at the very edges of the planet. Evidence for this unexpected reality comes from fossils recovered in Antarctica and the Arctic, regions that occupied polar latitudes during the Cretaceous. These remains reveal ecosystems populated not by occasional visitors, but by established communities. Plesiosaurs appear especially common in these deposits. Their bones occur so frequently that it is difficult to explain their presence as simple accidents of migration. Many seem to have lived substantial portions of their lives in waters shaped by long periods of seasonal darkness. Among the most distinctive inhabitants was Aristonectes, a peculiar elasmosaurid that differed noticeably from many of its relatives. Rather than possessing the extremely elongated proportions often associated with long-necked plesiosaurs, it carried a broader body and a comparatively shorter neck. Its skull contained numerous slender teeth, arranged in a way that suggests a feeding strategy unlike that of precision fish hunters. Many researchers propose that it filtered or strained small prey from productive waters, rich in plankton and other tiny organisms. Cold polar seas, energized by nutrient upwelling, may have provided ideal conditions for such a lifestyle. Further north, evidence from Alaska's Prince Creek Formation demonstrates that marine reptiles also occupied waters within the Arctic Circle. Mosasaur remains discovered there indicate that even these formidable predators ventured into regions experiencing prolonged winter darkness. Such findings challenge older assumptions that large marine reptiles were creatures restricted to permanently warm environments. The fossil record instead reveals animals capable of exploiting habitats across an enormous climatic range. How these reptiles endured polar winters remains one of the most intriguing questions in marine paleontology. Several possibilities have been proposed. Some populations may have migrated seasonally, following shifting prey resources between higher and lower latitudes. Others may have possessed physiological flexibility that allowed activity levels to change during darker months. Their sophisticated sensory systems may also have played an important role. Chemical detection, pressure sensing, vibration awareness, and perhaps even the ability to exploit faint bioluminescent signals could have reduced dependence on sunlight. The structure of polar marine communities appears different from those found nearer the equator. Fossils suggest that large-bodied forms capable of exploiting dense concentrations of small prey were especially successful. Rather than relying entirely on speed or pursuit, some species seem to have benefited from the extraordinary productivity generated by cold, nutrient-rich waters. This created ecosystems with their own ecological character, distinct from the predator-dominated environments of warmer seas. What emerges from these discoveries is a portrait of remarkable adaptability. The Mesozoic ocean extended into every latitude and every season. Whether beneath tropical sunlight or months of polar night, marine reptiles occupied the water. No coastline, no current, and no distant horizon stood beyond their reach. The ancient ocean was vast, and its great inhabitants were truly global. Beneath the waves, where mosasaurs hunted and plesiosaurs cruised, another world stretched across the bottom of the Mesozoic Sea. It received little sunlight, carried the slow rain of organic debris from above, and supported an immense network of life that rarely appears in dramatic reconstructions. Yet this quieter realm helped sustain every predator and prey species in the ocean. The giants of the surface depended on foundations laid far below. Among the most formidable inhabitants of these waters was Ixophanctinus audax, a predatory bony fish that reached approximately 6 meters in length. Its body was built for speed, with powerful muscles and a vast mouth lined with sharp teeth. Unlike many modern predatory fish that tear prey into pieces, Xephactinus often swallowed victims whole. One of the most remarkable fossils ever discovered preserves this behavior in extraordinary detail. Inside the body cavity of a Xephactinus lies an almost complete Gillicus arcuatus, measuring roughly 1.8 meters long. The smaller fish appears to have been swallowed intact. Some paleontologists suspect the struggling prey damaged internal organs during its final moments, killing the predator that had captured it. Sharing the waters was Enchotus, a fish far smaller than Xephactinus but no less distinctive. Its most striking feature was a pair of elongated fangs projecting from the front of its jaws. These teeth earned it the nickname saber-toothed herring, though it was neither a herring nor a harmless animal. Enchotus occupied a crucial middle position in the food web. It consumed smaller fish and invertebrates, while serving as prey for larger predators. Fossils of this genus occur in enormous numbers across Cretaceous deposits, suggesting it was one of the most successful hunters of its size. Not all important predators left abundant skeletons behind. Giant squid-like cephalopods inhabited the same seas, moving through the water with soft bodies that fossilized only rarely. Their existence is known primarily through durable structures, such as arm hooks and beaks preserved in sediments. These animals likely filled ecological roles, similar to those occupied by large modern squid, pursuing fish and smaller marine creatures while remaining vulnerable to larger hunters above. Life on the seafloor itself could achieve remarkable scale. In Oceramus, a giant bivalve common throughout much of the Cretaceous, developed shells exceeding 2 meters in length. Vast numbers accumulated across certain regions of the seabed. In some rock formations, their remains are so concentrated that entire geological layers are dominated by fragments of shell. These immense clams filtered nutrients from the water, helping process the productivity that flowed through the ecosystem. Covering many parts of the seabed was a pale sediment, unlike ordinary sand. It formed from the accumulated remains of microscopic coccolithophores, tiny planktonic organisms that produced intricate calcium carbonate plates. Over millions of years, countless billions settled downward, creating a soft, chalky blanket across large areas of the ocean floor. From these microscopic builders to the largest marine reptiles, every layer of the Mesozoic sea remained connected. Energy flowed upward through the ecosystem in an unbroken chain, linking the quiet depths to the predators that ruled the waters above. Change in the Mesozoic ocean did not occur in isolated bursts. It unfolded continuously, generation after generation, across nearly 186 million years. Every adaptation altered the balance of survival. Every new defense encouraged a stronger attack. Every improvement by one species became a challenge that another species had to answer. The result was a vast evolutionary contest that slowly transformed the oceans into some of the most competitive ecosystems Earth has ever produced. Biologists often describe this process through a concept known as Red Queen dynamics. The idea is deceptively simple. In a crowded ecosystem, standing still is not enough. A predator that becomes slightly faster gains an advantage. Prey species then benefit from becoming more agile, more alert, or better protected. Those improvements reduce the predator's success, creating pressure for further innovation. Both sides continue changing, not necessarily to gain dominance, but simply to avoid falling behind. Evolution becomes a treadmill that never truly stops. Evidence of this process can be seen throughout the fossil record. Ammonites provide one of the clearest examples. Across the Mesozoic, their shells became increasingly elaborate. Ribbing grew more pronounced. Internal sutures developed intricate, folded patterns. Chamber arrangements became more complex. These changes likely strengthened the shell against crushing forces while preserving buoyancy. Each modification represented a response to predators capable of breaking, puncturing, or peeling apart earlier designs. Predators were changing at the same time. The largest marine reptiles of the Triassic were impressive animals, yet later oceans repeatedly produced even larger hunters. This pattern was not universal across every lineage, but it appears consistently among apex predators. Large size offered advantages in hunting, competition, and defense against rivals. Once those benefits emerged, natural selection often favored further increases. Over millions of years, the upper limit of predator size gradually expanded. The same pattern appears in feeding adaptations. Hard crushing teeth evolved independently in several unrelated groups. Placodont reptiles developed broad dental batteries capable of breaking shellfish. Certain mosasaurs evolved rounded crushing teeth suited for heavily armored prey. Marine turtles possessed powerful beaks able to process resistant food sources. Some sharks followed similar pathways. These repeated innovations suggest that prey species were becoming increasingly difficult to consume forcing predators toward comparable solutions despite very different evolutionary histories. Speed also became an arena of competition. Fossils rarely preserve behavior directly, yet body plans reveal clear trends. Ichthyosaurs became progressively more streamlined through time, reducing drag and increasing swimming efficiency. Mosasaurs refined powerful, tail driven propulsion systems that generated bursts of acceleration. Plesiosaurs developed increasingly sophisticated use of their foreflippers, allowing precise movement through complex environments. Different lineages pursued different approaches, but all were responding to the same pressure: survival in an ecosystem where hesitation carried consequences. Even such escalation had limits. Physics imposes boundaries on body size, energy use, and movement. Biology places constraints on growth rates and genetic change. By the late Cretaceous, many marine ecosystems appear to have been approaching those limits. Predator and prey had spent millions of generations refining their capabilities, pushing against boundaries set by the ocean itself. The Mesozoic seas had become a world shaped by continuous competition, where evolution never rested and every advantage invited a response. Long before the final catastrophe arrived, subtle changes were already moving through the Mesozoic ocean. They did not announce themselves with sudden extinctions or dramatic collapses. Instead, they appeared as small shifts in diversity, changing environmental conditions, and growing signs that some ecosystems were beginning to lose the stability they had maintained for millions of years. The ocean remained vast, productive, and filled with life. Yet beneath that appearance of continuity, pressures were quietly accumulating. One of the most closely studied signals comes from the mosasaurs. During the final few million years of the Cretaceous, these dominant marine reptiles still occupied oceans around the world, yet some fossil analyses indicate a gradual reduction in diversity. The decline was not uniform across all groups, and it did not remove mosasaurs from their position as apex predators. Nevertheless, fewer species appear in the youngest fossil deposits compared with slightly older layers. Whether this represents genuine biological decline or limitations in the fossil record remains an active area of research, but the pattern has attracted considerable attention. Ammonites show a similar trend. For hundreds of millions of years, they had diversified into countless forms, adapting repeatedly to changing oceans and surviving crises that eliminated many other groups. Yet during the closing stages of the Cretaceous, several ammonite lineages vanished before the final extinction boundary. Species richness appears to have contracted in certain regions. Their disappearance was not instantaneous. Instead, some branches of the ammonite family tree seem to have been fading even before the end arrived. Attention often turns to a geological event occurring far from the sea itself. In what is now India, enormous volcanic eruptions were producing the vast formations known as the Deccan Traps. These eruptions continued across hundreds of thousands of years and released immense quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Such emissions had the potential to alter global temperatures, influence rainfall patterns, and modify ocean chemistry. Marine organisms sensitive to environmental change may have experienced increasingly difficult conditions as these volcanic pulses continued. Ocean acidification is one possible consequence discussed by researchers. As carbon dioxide concentrations increased, seawater chemistry may have shifted in ways that complicated shell formation for certain organisms. Even modest environmental disruptions can ripple through interconnected ecosystems. Small changes affecting plankton, shell-bearing animals, or nutrient cycles eventually influence predators higher in the food web. The complexity of these relationships makes it difficult to measure exactly how much stress marine communities were experiencing during the final stages of the Cretaceous. This uncertainty lies at the center of one of paleontology's most enduring debates. Some scientists argue that the Mesozoic ocean remained fundamentally resilient until the very end. In this view, the fossil record creates an illusion of decline where none truly existed. Others see evidence of ecosystems already under strain from volcanism, changing sea levels, and shifting ocean chemistry. According to that interpretation, many communities were becoming increasingly vulnerable before the final catastrophe arrived. The distinction is important because it shapes how resilience itself is understood. Yet, regardless of which interpretation proves most accurate, the ocean that had spent nearly 186 million years evolving toward greater complexity was approaching a moment from which there would be no recovery. The final transformation was now very near. It began with a point of light moving silently through space, a traveler that had wandered for untold ages before crossing paths with Earth. Roughly 66 million years ago, an asteroid between 10 and 15 kilometers wide struck the shallow sea near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. It arrived at a speed of approximately 20 kilometers per second. In less time than it takes to draw a breath, nearly 200 million years of marine dominance began to unravel. The energy released by the impact defies ordinary comparison. Estimates place it at roughly 10 billion Hiroshima atomic bombs. Numbers of that scale quickly lose meaning, so the consequences tell the story more clearly. Bedrock vaporized, water flashed into steam, molten debris was hurled beyond the atmosphere before falling back toward the planet. Across vast distances, landscapes experienced conditions no living organism had ever encountered. The event was not merely destructive, it altered the fundamental operating conditions of Earth itself. Within hours, enormous tsunamis spread outward from the impact zone. In parts of the Gulf of Mexico, waves hundreds of meters high swept across coastlines and shallow seas. Shock waves raced through the atmosphere, circling the planet repeatedly. Forests far from the impact site ignited as superheated material returned from space. Yet these immediate disasters, devastating as they were, represented only the opening moments of a much longer crisis. Fine dust, soot, and sulfate aerosols accumulated high in the atmosphere. Sunlight that had illuminated the oceans every day for hundreds of millions of years became increasingly blocked. The surface waters darkened, temperatures began to fall, seasonal rhythms that marine ecosystems depended upon abruptly failed. The ocean remained physically present, but the energy source sustaining its food webs was disappearing overhead. The first major casualties were the microscopic phytoplankton drifting through sunlit waters. These tiny organisms formed the foundation of marine productivity. Within weeks and months, populations collapsed across enormous regions. Creatures that fed upon them declined in turn. Small predators lost their food supply. Larger hunters soon followed. The crisis spread upward through the ecosystem with remarkable speed. Rather than a slow ecological decline, the marine world experienced a cascading failure that propagated from its very base. The great reptiles that had ruled the seas could not escape this process. Mosasaurs still possessed powerful jaws. Plesiosaurs still crossed the oceans with efficient strokes. Deep-diving species retained every adaptation that had once made them successful. None of those advantages mattered. Once prey became scarce, their bodies had evolved for a world of abundance. That world was vanishing. Ammonites met an even more complete fate. These cephalopods had endured multiple extinction events and survived environmental upheavals that eliminated countless other groups. Yet the final crisis proved different. Every remaining lineage disappeared. An evolutionary history stretching back hundreds of millions of years ended within a geologically instantaneous interval. In North America, the waters of the western interior seaway gradually withdrew as geological changes continued. Places that had recently supported Tylosaurus, Elasmosaurus, Xiphactinus, and countless other species became quieter with each passing age. The vast marine realm that had once seemed permanent faded into stone, leaving only fossils to mark the passing of the deadliest ocean Earth had ever known. The silence that followed was not complete. Beneath darkened skies and across oceans still recovering from catastrophe, life persisted in scattered pockets. The creatures that emerged from the end Cretaceous extinction were not necessarily the strongest, the fastest, or the most imposing. They were the ones capable of enduring instability. Their survival reveals a different kind of success, one measured not in dominance but in flexibility. Among the most important survivors were the sharks. They had shared the seas with giant marine reptiles for tens of millions of years, often overshadowed by larger and more spectacular predators. Yet when the collapse came, sharks endured. Their cartilaginous skeletons required fewer resources to build and maintain than heavy bony frameworks. Many species reproduced relatively quickly, and their diets were remarkably adaptable. Some could exploit coastal habitats, others deeper waters, and a few even moved into freshwater systems. When entire food chains disappeared, this ecological versatility became a powerful advantage. Sea turtles also crossed the extinction boundary. The lineage that once included enormous forms such as Archelon survived, though the giants themselves vanished. Smaller species required less food and could exploit a broader range of resources. Their ability to travel long distances through changing environments may have helped them navigate a world where productive feeding grounds appeared and disappeared unpredictably. The turtles that remained carried forward a lineage already ancient when the asteroid struck. Crocodilians survived as well, though not in the fully marine forms that had once patrolled open seas. Those specialized ocean-going relatives had disappeared long before the end of the Cretaceous. Freshwater rivers, estuaries, and coastal wetlands offered refuges that were less directly dependent on marine phytoplankton production. In these environments, crocodilians could feed opportunistically on fish, carrion, and almost anything else available. The body plan that had originated far earlier proved durable enough to weather one of the greatest biological crises in Earth's history. Bony fish emerged from the catastrophe in remarkable numbers. Teleosts, already diverse before the extinction, possessed characteristics that favored survival during unstable conditions. Many matured quickly, reproduced in large quantities, and occupied a wide range of ecological roles. While giant predators disappeared, countless smaller fish persisted, ready to expand into newly vacant habitats. Over time, they would become the foundation of modern marine ecosystems. The list of losses was far longer. Every large marine reptile vanished. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and all remaining oceanic giants disappeared entirely. Ammonites, despite surviving previous mass extinctions, were gone. The toothed diving birds of the Cretaceous vanished. Giant shell-bearing invertebrates disappeared from the seas. Ecological relationships that had developed across 186 million years ended within a geological instant. A pattern emerges from these outcomes. The survivors tended to be generalists. They consumed varied foods, tolerated changing environments, and reproduced efficiently. The creatures that depended on highly specialized roles were often the most vulnerable when those roles ceased to exist. The oceans that followed were still alive, but they were profoundly altered. Ancient dynasties had ended. Familiar food webs were gone. Recovery would come slowly, unfolding across millions of years, as a new marine world began to take shape from the scattered survivors of the old. Recovery arrived so slowly that no living creature could have witnessed it in full. After the end Cretaceous extinction, the oceans remained biologically diminished for millions of years. Food webs had been shattered, dominant lineages erased, and ecological roles left vacant. The great marine systems that had once supported astonishing numbers of predators did not spring back quickly. Instead, the sea entered a prolonged period of rebuilding, a patient reconstruction unfolding across roughly 10 million years. In the earliest stages of recovery, survivors expanded into newly available habitats. Deadliest fish diversified further, filling niches left empty by vanished competitors. Sharks continued to evolve, becoming increasingly important predators in many marine environments. Marine ecosystems regained stability gradually, beginning from the smallest organisms upward. Microscopic plankton communities recovered first, restoring the foundation upon which every larger animal ultimately depended. From those invisible beginnings, more complex webs of life slowly reassembled. Yet one of the most remarkable developments occurred far from the ocean itself. On land, mammals were diversifying in the aftermath of the extinction. Most remained small and inconspicuous, occupying ecological opportunities left behind by the disappearance of non-avian dinosaurs. Among these mammals, a lineage emerged that would eventually return to the sea and reshape marine ecosystems in an entirely new way. Around 50 million years ago, in what is now Pakistan, a small animal known as Pakicetus lived near rivers and coastal environments. At first glance, it scarcely resembled a whale. It possessed 4 legs, moved primarily on land, and retained the appearance of a slender, predatory mammal. Yet within its anatomy lay characteristics linking it to the cetacean lineage. It represented the earliest known chapter in a transformation that would eventually rival some of the most dramatic evolutionary transitions of the Mesozoic. Over the next 15 million years, descendants of these early mammals became increasingly aquatic. Legs shortened and adapted for swimming, bodies elongated. Hearing systems changed to function more effectively underwater. Nostrils gradually shifted position. By the time Basilosaurus appeared during the Eocene, the transformation was essentially complete. Reaching lengths of approximately 18 meters, this fully marine whale occupied the role of a large ocean predator. In broad ecological terms, it echoed the dominance once achieved by giant marine reptiles, though it arrived through an entirely different evolutionary pathway. The similarities between cetaceans and earlier marine reptiles reveal one of evolution's recurring patterns. When animals confront the same physical challenges, similar solutions often emerge. Streamlined bodies reduce drag. Flippers improve maneuverability. Powerful tails provide efficient propulsion. Though separated by roughly 100 million years, whales and ichthyosaurs independently arrived at strikingly comparable designs because both adapted to life in open water. Even so, the rebuilt ocean never became a true replica of the one that had been lost. No lineage recreated the extraordinary long-necked hunting strategy of plesiosaurs. Ammonites never returned. The coexistence of numerous giant marine reptile groups disappeared permanently from Earth's history. Certain possibilities, once erased, remained erased. Modern oceans possess their own richness and complexity. The blue whale exceeds the size of any known Mesozoic animal, yet it feeds on tiny prey rather than ruling as an apex hunter. Life recovered, diversified, and flourished once more. But it did so along a different path, carrying forward both the legacy of survival and the permanent absence of what came before. Long after the oceans themselves changed, traces of their vanished inhabitants remained hidden beneath cliffs, quarries, riverbanks, and windswept plains. For millions of years, the bones rested in silence, sealed within layers of stone that slowly rose, fractured, and eroded. The creatures were gone, yet fragments of their existence waited patiently for another species to discover them. The story of the Mesozoic ocean is therefore not only a story about ancient animals, it is also a story about the people who brought those animals back into human awareness. Along the Jurassic coast of Lyme Regis in southern England, waves and winter storms continually exposed new fossils from the cliffs. In the early 19th century, Mary Anning walked those shorelines searching for specimens. Without formal scientific training and without the institutional support available to many of her contemporaries, she uncovered discoveries that transformed understanding of prehistoric life. Among them were some of the earliest scientifically described ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. These fossils revealed creatures unlike anything living in the modern world, forcing naturalists to confront the reality of extinction and deep geological time. Although recognition during her lifetime was limited, her work became foundational to paleontology. Elsewhere in Europe, another discovery helped reshape scientific thought. During the late 18th century, laborers working in a chalk quarry near Maastricht in the Netherlands uncovered an enormous skull. The specimen eventually became known as Mosasaurus, one of the first giant marine reptiles ever recognized. At a time when the very concept of prehistoric worlds remained uncertain, the fossil generated fascination across the continent. It passed through political turmoil during the French Revolutionary Wars and eventually became one of the most famous specimens in the history of vertebrate paleontology. A single skull had revealed that entirely different ecosystems once existed beneath ancient seas. Across the Atlantic, the chalk deposits of Kansas preserved a different chapter of the story. These rocks formed within the ancient western interior seaway and later yielded extraordinary fossils of Tylosaurus, Elasmosaurus, giant fish, marine birds, and countless other species. Many specimens emerged with remarkable completeness, allowing researchers to reconstruct entire ecosystems rather than isolated animals. Skeletons preserved stomach contents, bite marks, healed injuries, and even evidence of predator-prey interactions. The stone itself became a record, not merely of anatomy, but of behavior. What makes fossils unusual among scientific evidence is their physical immediacy. A mosasaur vertebra is not an illustration, a model, or a digital reconstruction. It is part of the animal itself. The mineralized bone still occupies space in the present world. Holding such an object creates a direct connection across immense spans of time. The gap between past and present does not disappear, yet it becomes tangible in a way few other sciences can offer. Many paleontologists describe a particular moment during excavation when an ancient creature begins to feel real. A curve of bone emerges from surrounding rock. Another fragment appears nearby. Gradually, a skeleton takes shape. What had existed only as an idea becomes an individual animal that once moved through a living ocean. That transformation is one of paleontology's greatest gifts. It allows the distant past to enter the present, not as abstraction, but as something that can be touched, measured, and understood. In doing so, it quietly expands the scale of human perspective, reminding us how brief our own chapter is within Earth's much longer story. Across 186 million years, the Mesozoic ocean became a vast record of possibility. From the ruins left behind by the Permian extinction emerged ecosystems of increasing complexity, each generation inheriting a world shaped by those that came before. New predators appeared, new prey evolved, and new relationships formed between organisms separated by millions of years of evolutionary history. The result was not a single stable system, but a continually changing tapestry of life, adapting to opportunity, challenge, and change. What stands out most is not any individual creature, no matter how large or strange. It is the speed with which life rebuilt after devastation. The Permian extinction removed the overwhelming majority of marine species. Entire ecological structures vanished. Yet within a comparatively short geological interval, the oceans once again supported intricate food webs stretching from microscopic plankton to enormous apex predators: ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, ammonites, giant fish, marine birds, turtles, sharks, and countless other forms emerged from lineages that survived catastrophe and diversified into new roles. This process reveals something fundamental about life itself. Evolution possesses no blueprint, no destination, and no grand objective. It works through variation, inheritance, and selection, operating continuously across immense spans of time. Given opportunity and enough generations, it produces solutions of astonishing variety. The streamlined body of an ichthyosaur, the precision hunting adaptations of a long-necked plesiosaur, and the crushing bite of a giant mosasaur were not planned outcomes. They were responses to specific environmental circumstances unfolding across millions of years. The escalating competition that shaped the Mesozoic ocean is often described as an arms race. Yet this competition carried no intention. Predators did not become more effective because the ecosystem sought greater danger. Prey did not evolve defenses because nature desired balance. Each change emerged from countless interactions repeated across generations. Survival favored certain traits. Those traits accumulated. Complexity arose naturally from the continuous exchange between challenge and adaptation. Seen through this lens, the great marine reptiles become something different from the monsters they are often portrayed as. They were not embodiments of aggression or terror. They were highly specialized solutions to specific ecological problems. Every tooth, fin, vertebra, sensory adaptation, and hunting strategy represented a successful answer to the demands of a particular environment. Their forms reflected the conditions of their world as clearly as modern whales, sharks, and dolphins reflect the conditions of ours. Perhaps the most humbling lesson comes from how quickly such complexity disappeared. The extinction at the end of the Cretaceous erased ecological relationships that had taken nearly 200 million years to develop. Vast networks of interacting species vanished in a geological instant. Diversity, sophistication, and dominance proved temporary. The ocean's most successful inhabitants could not guarantee their own permanence. And yet permanence was never the point. When one chapter ended, another began. Life adapted to altered conditions and continued forward. New lineages expanded. New ecosystems formed. New evolutionary experiments unfolded. The ocean that exists today is not the same ocean that once carried mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, but it is descended from it. The story never truly stopped. It changed direction, carried onward by the same creative processes that have shaped life from the beginning. There is a particular stillness that settles over the sea at dusk. The horizon softens, the surface darkens, and the boundary between water and sky begins to blur. Looking outward across that vast expanse, it is easy to imagine permanence, as though the ocean before us has always been exactly as it is now. Yet beneath those familiar waves lies the memory of a world so different that it can seem almost impossible to reconcile with the modern sea. Today's oceans are alive with abundance. Whales cross entire basins, sharks patrol continental shelves, squid rise from the depths each night. Coral reefs support thousands of species in intricate networks of competition and cooperation. The richness is undeniable. Even so, the living ocean represents only one chapter in a far longer story. Entire forms of life that once dominated marine ecosystems have vanished completely, leaving no direct descendants to carry their legacy forward. No modern animal occupies the role once held by the giant mosasaurs. Nothing now combines their immense size, rapid acceleration, chemical tracking abilities, and broad predatory diet. The long-necked elasmosaurids have no equivalent either. Their unusual bodies, built around extraordinary precision rather than brute force, disappeared without replacement. The great ichthyosaurs, masters of deep-water hunting whose enormous eyes searched through darkness far below the reach of sunlight, also belong entirely to the past. The blue whale exceeds every known marine reptile in size, yet it represents a fundamentally different strategy. It moves through the ocean, feeding on immense quantities of tiny prey, sustained by productivity rather than predation. Its existence demonstrates how evolution continued to explore new possibilities after the extinction, but it does not recreate the ecological architecture that existed during the Mesozoic. The structure of the modern ocean is different, shaped by different pressures and inhabited by different actors. What made the ancient seas remarkable was not merely the presence of giant animals, it was the simultaneous existence of multiple lineages of large marine predators occupying distinct roles across vast geographic ranges. Surface waters, open oceans, coastal environments, deep habitats, and polar seas all supported their own specialized hunters. Together, they formed a system of extraordinary complexity, refined over millions of years through continual adaptation and competition. Yet, the story has not disappeared entirely. Every year, new fossils emerge from cliffs, quarries, deserts, and polar landscapes. A vertebra weathering from stone, a jaw hidden within a hillside, a skeleton preserved beneath layers of ancient sediment. Each discovery adds another sentence to a narrative still being assembled. The ocean that produced those animals is gone, but traces of it remain scattered across the continents, waiting to be recognized. Those traces remind us that the world has never been fixed. Oceans change, ecosystems rise and fall, dominant creatures appear, flourish, and vanish. What endures is not any particular species or community, but the continuous movement of life through time. The sea before us carries no visible record of mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, or ichthyosaurs. It carries something older and deeper instead, the unbroken passage of water itself, flowing onward through ages beyond memory.